Okay, I guess that we're now recording. Thank you. So I'd like to welcome Sarah Cartagena of the Latino Policy Forum to give us a brief update on state and federal policy developments related to immigration.
Thank you so much, Mayor Craig. As I know you all have a really packed agenda, I will try to be quick, but just wanted to come and share some updates and some programs that are currently running that could benefit your immigrant populations. So to start off, there's a COVID-19 financial assistance recovery program that is open through participating welcoming centers. I will share that list. It's a list of around 20 organizations throughout Illinois with their address and their phone numbers and the zip codes that they serve. They're currently giving up to $2,000 per adult and $500 per child to families who didn't receive at least one federal stimulus check. Each organization has their own application process and own availability of funds. And so that's why I'll share this list with everybody. So if you wanted to share with your immigrant populations. For eligibility requirements, it's, has to be an Illinois resident for at least 3 months, provide proof of identity, proof of address, proof of income, and then proof of COVID-19 financial burden. I also wanted to mention, I know that I've talked about this in other meetings that we've had regarding the public charge and how the 2019 federal public charge is no longer in effect. The Biden administration has just recently proposed their own public charge rule. And the public comment period for that was open from February 24th until April 25th. So it just closed. A lot of advocates in the state did submit a public comment on behalf of many organizations, and pretty much what they're asking for in terms of public charge is to pretty much keep it the same as it was before 2019, what was in place in 1999. For those who aren't familiar with what the public charge is, the public charge test is something that is usually given by immigration officials when an individual is applying to either enter the United States or is applying to become a legal permanent resident, and is just to assure that that person will not predominantly or principally be reliant on government benefits. And so I can share that public comment with anybody who's interested. We had 76 organizations statewide sign on to that. I also wanted to share that last fiscal year, there was an appropriation of $4.2 million for legal services for the immigrant community. And the Illinois Department of Human Services has recently put out a NOFO for organizations that provide legal services for the immigrant community to apply for this funding, to either hire new attorneys, paralegals, staff, or to maintain the staff that they have. The application was due until May 9th, but they've extended it until May 12th. And I can pop that link into the chat once I'm done as well, if you know of any organizations that would benefit from that funding. And then I wanted to share that the Cook County Public Defenders Unit has just recently started defending immigrants in Chicago Immigration Court. As many of you probably know, there are no longer detention centers in Illinois, but there are in surrounding states, and they still have appointments at the Chicago Immigration Court. And so this unit is starting to defend immigrants who have their first master hearing there and who have either personal ties to Cook County, they've lived in Cook County, or have worked in Cook County, or they have family members who live and work in Cook County. And I'll share those flyers as well in a follow-up. And then lastly, wanted to share these two new bills that passed this legislative session. One was a permanent expansion of the state income credit to include ITIN filers, in addition to other individuals, such as those who are over 65 or those who are aged 18 to 24 who don't have children. This will start next fall, so next tax season. In addition to that, legislators also included a rebate, a tax rebate, $50 per adult and $100 per child. This will also be available to ITIN filers this fall. And then lastly, the other bill was an expansion of healthcare coverage to low-income immigrants. So this originally, there was a bill passed 2 years ago that expanded healthcare coverage to low-income immigrants 65 and over. Then last year, they'd expanded it to 55 and over. And now recently, this legislative session, it was expanded to 42 years and over. And that will start July 3rd. For those individuals who are 42 years and over, who are low income and don't qualify for Medicaid because of immigration status. And then lastly, just wanted to plug the Latino Policy Forum has recently published a immigrant tenant handbook in English and Spanish. It's currently digitally available, but we are hoping to soon print them out. And this essentially just covers most of housing policies and laws in the state of Illinois and the rights and protections that all tenants have, and with a particular focus on immigrants. And that is my bit.
Wow, I started to write, then I gave up.
I will send a follow-up with all of this.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. I look for the follow-up. And one of the first things you said for welcoming organizations, are they defined somehow?
Yeah, so there are, it's 34 organizations that are welcoming centers that receive funding from the Illinois Department of Human Services to specifically provide services to the immigrant community. And so it's a number of those organizations that are participating in this program.
Very good. And so they're on board with everything you just spoke. That's a big assumption on my part. Thank you, Sarah. Anyone question for Sarah? Hearing none, thank you, Sarah. Hang in there with us. Next, we have our DEI survey results, our regional themes and challenges. Katie, you've been working very hard on this, and I do appreciate it. Katie of the Mayor's Caucus staff will provide us some updates on the Mayor's Caucus activities. She'll also share the results of the Diversity Task Force survey that many of us have participated in. And Katie, do you have the slideshow ready?
I do. Let me just pull them up.
Okay, you got the lead, Katie.
Thank you, Mayor. And let me just make sure that the screen share is working. Can you all see the slideshow? Yep, I'm seeing some thumbs up. Great. Okay. So thank you again, Mayor, for the introduction. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Katie Friedman, and I'm a project manager at the caucus. And I've been working on a lot of our diversity, equity, and inclusion work over the past year. I'd like to start with a brief update on the work that we've been doing over the past year and share some of our lessons learned before I move into the results from last month's survey. And all of this will set the stage for our partner from UIC Great Cities to explain the pilot that we've been working on. So the Mayor's Caucus has two different groups that focus specifically on topics related to DEI. The first is our Diversity Issues Task Force, which we're all participating in today. And this group meets quarterly and has been around since 2010. The second group actually grew out of the task force, and that's our DEI working group. This group formed last summer at the suggestion of one of our member municipalities that expressed a desire for more regular, active dialogue with other communities trying to deal with these topics. I'll explain a little bit more about the structure of the working group on the next slide. But in addition to these two groups, the caucus secured a grant from the Chicago Community Trust last November, which is allowing us to develop modules on different DEI topics, along with community profiles, which I'll explain in a little bit, maintain a shared resource repository on our website, and explore a pilot partnership with the UIC Great Cities Institute and ILCMA, which is the purpose of our meeting today. The working group has been really central to a lot of what we've learned about municipal DEI over the past year, so I want to really briefly explain how it works. So our quarterly task force meetings are typically pretty presentation-based, like the meeting that we're having today. But our working groups, in contrast, are shorter 1-hour meetings on the second Friday of every month that are entirely dialogue-based. Last summer, the group came up with a series of specific topics related to DEI that they had begun talking about within their own communities. And these have served as the focus of each monthly meeting that are listed on the screen. The caucus develops a handful of facilitation questions based on what communities express they want to learn about each topic. And then the participants, which are a mix of municipal staff and elected officials, they have the floor to communicate among their peers about shared challenges and promising practices. We have about 15 to 20 municipalities that participate in these meetings regularly. The conversations are very pragmatic in nature because it's a lot of practitioners talking about their everyday work, and they're modeled on how we know municipalities prefer to learn, which is learning from what their neighbors are doing. We talk a lot about what works and sometimes even more about what doesn't work. We've been talking a lot about the relationship as well between external facing work like community engagement commissions and community surveys, as well as internal facing work like staff training, hiring and recruitment, and data. And you can kind of see this diversity of topics on the meeting topics on the screen. We've learned that some communities start focusing on DEI by looking internally, while others focus externally, while still others are trying to do both simultaneously. Which approach works better is really appearing to depend on the municipality and its unique circumstances. But overall, we're learning that the internal and external work are interrelated. One example of that is effective community engagement of the diverse voices in the community requires a staff person being trained to understand the community and equipped with the skills to facilitate productive conversations. One of the big values of these meetings has been breaking down the overwhelming topic of DEI into manageable, tangible actions. And while different communities have different entry points to the work, such as a human relations commission or hiring and recruitment, overall, the meetings are helping us understand how all of these pieces are starting to fit together. And that's where our modules are coming in. So we were asked by our membership last year to create case studies of communities that have been doing this work. And it's one of our deliverables for our grant with the Chicago Community Trust. What we've decided to do is to start calling these case studies modules, and we've been modeling them off of the topics identified in the working group as a way to capture some of the valuable lessons that we've been learning together over the past year. I'll share an example in just a moment, but the idea is to concisely summarize some of the takeaways and themes within each specific DEI topic, and then highlight a community that has done work in this area. I'm going to pull up an example very quickly and get a drink of water. Are you all seeing a PDF that says diversity, equity, and inclusion in municipal government? Seeing some thumbs.
Yes.
Okay, great. So this is an example from the village of Flossmoor, and I thank Flossmoor very much for allowing us to share. Currently, this is in PDF form. The final product is going to be more interactive and visual, possibly a website. But the idea is we summarize in less than a page what the main takeaways were, why this is valuable to a community. And then again, in about a page or less, we tell the story of a community that started their DEI work by doing this. I'm just going through very quickly. We summarize their lessons learned based on what we've talked about with them. We give contact information so that you could reach out if you were interested in doing something like this in your community. And then we list regional resources and other resources, like an example of a memo that was sent to the village board, or a resolution, etc. And we will be doing this for all of the topics in the DEI working group. And I'll pull my slides back up. Are you seeing the slides again? Yep.
So Flossmoor was considered a module, Katie?
Yeah, so the module, what we're thinking about currently, the module is the first part that summarizes kind of the lessons learned from our conversation with the working group. And then as part of the module, we have a profile of a community. So we profiled Flossmoor, who worked with their community to develop a shared understanding of what diversity, equity, and inclusion will look like for them. So the final product is expected this summer, and we're still developing what that might look like. And we're very open to feedback about what you think would be the most usable tool. We also see this as a very iterative process, and we hope to keep adding to it and better creating a visual tool to show how all of these pieces go together. Some lessons learned, just to summarize before I go on to the survey. There's no one size fits all to DEI, and there's many different entry points. And we're not looking at any one entry point as right or wrong, because it really depends on your unique community, your staff capacity, your organizational culture, et cetera. We found that communities are interested in both internal and external facing practices, and they seem to be interrelated. And finally, the peer sharing model of learning from each other has been very productive to identify some of the shared challenges. Okay, so moving on to the survey results, and I am going to have a drink of water. Okay, as a little bit of background, we sent out a survey in about mid-March to all the mayors and managers in our 7-county region. So that's about 275 municipalities. The goals of the survey were, first, to assess regional interests and strategic priorities for 2022 to 2023. Basically, we'd spent the bulk of last year really zeroing in on municipal DEI, and we wanted to check in with our municipalities to see if this is still the direction we wanted to move in as a collective. Second goal was to identify common challenges and new emerging practices in the region that we may not have heard of yet. And finally, to engage new communities that are working on these topics. And I just want to thank all of the communities that responded to the survey. We ended up receiving 55 responses representing 54 communities. And I want to really briefly share a little information about who actually responded to our survey. The breakdown of responses by position type is on the screen. But notably, I'd like to point out that over half of our respondents were either managers, assistant managers, or assistants to the manager. About a fourth of our respondents were mayors, and the final fifth of respondents were part of an other category, which included police chiefs, DEI managers, HR directors, human service directors, clerks, etc. And one of the reasons I pull this out is because we saw a very strong representation from management staff, which demonstrates to us that there's an alignment between who we're engaging with on these issues in our organization and ILCMA membership. Many of you on the call may have responded to the survey. The other thing I wanted to point out was just the diversity of responses that we received. We received responses from all 7 counties in our region, with the strongest representation from Cook, DuPage, and Kane counties. The communities that responded have populations from under 5,000 to over 100,000 people, and they represented very diverse demographic and socioeconomic profiles. And to us, that really shows that communities of all sizes, geographic, socioeconomic, and demographic profiles are dealing with issues related to DEI. And now to the results. So one of the first questions we asked was what you wanted to get out of these quarterly task force meetings. And I've highlighted the most popular responses here, which are learning about best practices from other municipalities in the region, presentations from outside subject matter experts, and learning about grant resources. I want to pause here and ask if this matches your perspectives. In particular, we're really interested in better understanding the relationship between these quarterly task force meetings and our monthly working groups moving forward, because we found that active peer dialogue in the working group seems to be of high interest to many communities, but dialogue didn't actually show up very high on this list. So, feel free to speak up or put your thoughts in the chat. and whether this matches how you feel.
So Katie, I think
Yeah.
when you talk about the modules, best practice
Mhm.
from other municipalities, I thought that was a good example of what many of us like to see coming through.
That's great to hear.
From my perspective, when I look at learn about best practices from other municipalities, I think that's the same. I think I thought that was the same as ability to have open dialogue with other municipalities. So I think those two are very closely linked.
That's good feedback.
Yeah, and I like that learning from best practices from other municipalities across the country is fourth there, right below the top three. I think that's really important to really understanding what's happening and where the best things are happening from across the country.
That's also great. That's also feedback that we've kind of received throughout the year. So we'll definitely take that into consideration. Please feel free to share your comments in the chat. I'm just going to move forward in the interest of time, but we will have time for more dialogue later in the meeting as well. So moving on to the top focus areas, diversity, equity, and inclusion practices in municipal government rose to the top of this survey. It's closely followed by economic and community development, so I want to note that as well. But I'm going to dive deeper into the DEI practices and touch on the rest a little bit later. Within each topic, we had asked communities to comment on their current activities in this area. And what actually surprised me was that the most common response in this section was that communities are currently examining their internal operations with a DEI lens. Because the Mayor's Caucus tends to engage with external policymakers, I was anticipating that we might see more responses like, we have a commission that addresses DEI, or we hold events to celebrate diversity, or even that the municipality had identified DEI as a strategic priority, maybe at the board or council level. But the emphasis on internal operations feels very significant to me and underscores the importance of looking at the public administration component of this work, in addition to some of the community engagement and policy work that we often hear about. So for now, I'd like to pause once again and ask, does this sound right to many of you here? Do you have any comments? You can feel free to speak up or put your thoughts in the chat as well. I will take the silence as this aligns with how you're feeling, but again, feel free to put your thoughts in the chat. Moving on to some of the key challenges. These were across all of the survey topics, and they included limited staffing, resources, and internal expertise to do the work, not knowing where or how to get started, lacking connections with other municipalities doing this work and awareness of promising practices in various areas, lacking a unified effort with school districts, libraries, business community, etc., and difficulties connecting, building trust, and engaging with a diversity of residents. While many of these are not surprising, I think it's really important in helping us frame how we can go about tackling some of these challenges collectively as a region. I mentioned earlier that no one community is alike, which you are all very familiar with, and no one size fits all. There is no one size fits all approach to DEI. That said, there are shared challenges that have come up in the working group and came up in this survey that we can start to tackle together. And these challenges really form the foundation of the work that we're trying to do with UIC Great Cities that Kathleen, Dr. Yang-Clayton will describe later. I will end on this slide. One of the main things that we've learned over the past year is that DEI isn't so much a specific policy agenda as a lens through which all municipal services can be viewed. We've learned from the topics identified in our working group that DEI touches all aspects of municipal government, from finance and budgeting to customer service, to community engagement, to housing and community planning. Because of all of that, all of the other strategic priorities like economic and community development and language access can be incorporated into the theme of DEI practices for municipal government. It's really going to be about how we choose to approach these various topics. For example, any one of the topics identified in the survey can form the basis of a future working group meeting. The key takeaway that I really wanted to share that we felt came out of the survey is that a focus on integrating these principles of DEI into everyday municipal operations is critical for achieving the external equitable outcomes that we're looking for. And as I mentioned on the last slide, that really forms the crux of what we're trying to accomplish with the UIC Great Cities team. And that is everything that I have for right now.
Thanks, Katie. I really appreciate your report. Help us focus on, I've been looking at the different modules and how we can integrate those as they come about. Each municipality, I'm sure, has a plan or it's looking for that plan and guidance with the UIC that you engaged and others. Glad to see the managers on board. That's very helpful. So next we have a UIC Great Cities pilot updates, and Dr. Kathleen Yang-Clayton will be addressing us to describe the pilot program to help municipalities operationalize DEI. Kathleen?
Thank you, Mayor Craig. Hey, so it's great to be here. We are running behind, so I'm just going to do this. If you're curious about who I am, if I haven't met you or you haven't heard me talk, that's me. You can go check that out later. I'm just going to dive right into what Katie really just teed up, which is all this data that has been collected that kind of is amplifying similar themes across both ILCMA's concerns and challenges and opportunities, as well as with MMC. I've been swimming in this work for more than a few years. And so I'm just going to present to all of you the best collective thinking with the working group of MMC and ILCMA of what we're proposing to do for the pilot program starting this fall. So there's going to be details. I'm totally happy to share the slide deck as well. But this is where we're going to go. All right. Okay. What is the intention of this course? All right. So let me just give you the big picture, and then I'll drill down into some details for you guys. Okay. So really, we're utilizing some of the best experiential learning, adult learning. This is not your typical 3-hour graduate seminar where you're just going to sit there and listen to professor drone on and on. We really want to create an experiential foundation for racial equity-driven change through learning hands-on tools for two things, right? Two specific areas in public administration that many of you probably know about. One is change management. This is the framework in which organizations identify the process and structure changes needed to achieve improved outcomes. So remember, when we are going to drill into this pilot project, the work that we've been doing, everything that Katie just said, the reason why we care about racial equity and we center that in our analysis is so that we can actually improve the performance and impact of public service to the communities that we serve. Okay, we got to always remember that. So this change management piece is really thinking about what are the things that we can improve upon in the internal environment so that our employees, our frontline staff, everyone who serves feel like they're part of the community and actually are empowered on the inside to make those performance-driven changes, which is the second piece, right? So change management is one thing. It's like, hey, we need to sort of adapt or change some of the things that we've always done for a really long time differently. Okay, great. The second piece to this, and this is kind of where MMC and ILCMA's kind of magic interaction effects are happening, is performance management. So you still have administrators, you still need to follow rules. Okay, there are already programs that are out there that are path dependent, that have been going on for years. You can't magically change them in one day or with one declaration or press conference. You got to work through all this stuff. So this is what the intention of this course is really drilling in and thinking about all of these more complex pieces to how we operationalize racial equity. Okay, so what are we saying that we've heard from people who are kind of interested in this? Participant outcomes. One, learn the principles of racial equity-driven organizational change and how you can use iterative learning models. Basically, it's pilot type projects to create opportunities for teams within your organization to improve results for themselves and their partners, like external partner organizations. Second outcome, apply disciplined, practical approaches to incorporating learning models into management and leadership decision-making processes that need improvement. Third, experience how other mission-oriented individuals are confronting our times and changing environments while strengthening their results and relationships. So there's a relationship building component to this pilot. And finally, we are going to utilize peer support and small group coaching to think through specifically how you will apply the READY model in your context. So we're going to leverage all the great modules that MMC is developing, and all of the sort of these toolkits that abound all over the place from across the country. We're going to leverage that and we're going to use those things, but really focus in on how we provide the learning space and the coaching that many of you said that you would like, so that you can specifically work out issues that are very unique to your situations. All right, the other piece of that's very, very important, and I'm emphasizing this because I assume some of you might be interested, or you might know people who are interested. This program is going to be intensive, right? So we expect you to practice the tools and engage with the principles in support of your current work, not in addition to it. So you gotta have a project, okay? So your work calendar, look towards the second half of the year. If you have a big project that either is coming down the pathway, or you've kind of been stuck and you're like, I don't know how to move this, it needs to be something that is really on your calendar. It's on your work plan to accomplish, okay? So really the participants that are gonna find the most success in this pilot are the people who actually have specific projects that are comprehensive, okay? Meaning it cuts across at least 2 departments, maybe 3. Okay, so you're thinking kind of organization level. So what is the structure and potential topics? Let me go through the structure real quick. So along the bottom, you'll see these are the actual dates we finally figured out. So we're gonna start on the 17th of August. It's in person. 2 weeks later, there's going to be an online small group coaching session. So each of you will get broken out into groups of 4 or 3. They're gonna be very small. You're going to have somebody who is an experienced professional coach who will go through some of the things that you will have had to have done 2 weeks after the in-person training. You can't make any of these dates at this point. I'm just saying it's a pilot. We need full commitment. Okay. We're working on hybrid ideas, but for now, because of the relationship building piece and really needing to nail down what is actually being learned, it's going to be in person. Okay. So we call them cycles, right? So that's the thing. The first 5 months, all cohort trainings on Wednesdays. Then it's followed, again, I'm just repeating, 2 weeks of work on your own, and is completed by a small group coaching session the week of, let's say, we meet on the 17th of August. the week of the 29th, there's going to be a couple of different slots, and you sign up and you stick to those slots, and it's online. The sixth cohort session is structured more around kind of a bit of a celebration, just more relationship building, but also sharing where you landed with your projects. And then we're doing evaluations straight through. So there may be some topics in that sixth session that we can't predict right now that you might want more follow-up. Maybe we do a panel discussion. I don't know what it's going to look like, but we're kind of reserving it so that we make sure that we go through some learning if there are gaps or things that you guys want to learn more about. So what are the potential topics? There are 4. I'm going to try to get through this pretty fast, but you're going to see a lot of similar topics from what Katie presented earlier. There's nothing different. Okay, a lot of this stuff, topic 1 is really performance management, right? How do you establish systems to collect relevant DEI data? It is not as easy as just saying that we're going to collect it, right? Analytic tools and metrics, establishing accountability mechanisms to increase and sustain DEI outcomes, audit of policies, audit of social service gaps, assessing customer service practices. Okay. Topic 2, communications, specifically internal. Okay, and I'm slowing down because I know that there's always a tendency to want to think about external communications, but in every single case that I have seen, that the research points to, whatever, when you are facing challenges communicating externally, you almost have a 150% likelihood that internally things aren't going so well. So first, we're going to focus on the internal. What does this mean? Things like we've heard, hey, how do we develop functional interdepartmental working groups focused on this stuff? Functional. Second, what if we wanted to conduct an internal staff survey and focus groups to assess our internal organizational culture? What do we do then? What does facilitation actually mean for productive community engagement? And again, the community that we talk about in this READY model and the work that we do, it is the community within. It is your employees. It's sometimes the first ring of nonprofit partnerships that you have, or maybe those libraries in the schools. It's internal. It is not what we typically think of as external partners. Okay. 3. Well, topic 3 is a combination of HR and finance, right? So one is HR management. How do we analyze? So it's not even how. We don't have any capacity to do any of that first bullet point. What do we do? Because that's pretty much what I've heard consistently from almost every single HR person that I work with. This is really great. We need to collect this. I am trying to fill vacancies. I have no additional staff, but this is a great idea. We're going to move from this is a great idea to this has to be somebody's job. Okay. Second, reviewing hiring and recruitment practices, and included in this is retention. We'll talk about that later. Financial management. The thing about financial management is a very specific, highly technical thing, but one of the things that a lot of people have asked about is, what does it mean to incorporate participatory budgeting? What is participatory budgeting? Why do we need this? How does this happen? So that's a potential topic. Assessing procurement and purchasing practices is the other one. Okay, so these are the topics that we're going to be covering. Some of the frequently asked questions that we keep on getting. So I'm just going to cover how many participants. All right, so right now we're asking for 2 senior leaders. We're aiming for 10 municipalities. MMC and ILCMA are in charge of sort of identifying the rubric for selection. Who's on the selection committee? Us. Is this in person or both? Okay. It's 1 2-hour in-person training, 2.5 hour, 1 1-hour small group coaching session. What is the cost? Right now for the pilot, it's covered by the Chicago Community Trust. Thank you to the trust. In the future, there are going to be program costs of between $2,500 to $4,000 per participant. We also want it to be on a sliding scale. I'm going to stop there. That is the last slide. I know it was a lot. I will ask Katie to go ahead and actually, if you can just, I can send it to you as a PDF, but please don't share the editable version, or else I'll lose all my slides. So that's the, I don't know, 10-minute version. Sorry, I went through it really fast.
Well, Kathleen, you've obviously put a lot of thought into this. It's almost frightening when we have to try to apply that to our day-to-day operation,
Yeah.
especially in communities that are not staff rich.
Yes.
We've been suffering on the state's lack of support for municipal government. And I'm talking about our local government distributive fund. It's turned into a joke. So those kind of support initiatives really are, we've been tightening our belt all over the place. So those are major concerns locally. And so I'm just throwing that out there. And I think you touched on that. You know, it's a consideration. Is this a smart thing to do? I believe it is. You know, I've been a part of a similar initiative a number of years ago when the FAA controllers all walked out. And so recovery was a 10-year deal, and it took a long time. So this is not something, I'm glad to see the pilot. I think anyone who participates in the pilot will be ahead of the game, so to speak. But the commitment it's going to take in the entire municipality to have that commitment across the board. And so I'm really looking forward to see how we move ahead with the next steps. Katie's been doing a great job, I know, working with you, and I'm certainly glad you're on board. The pilot is going to take a few dollars put there, and that's there. So I'm really happy to see that. So we're all thinking on the same plane with our objective encouragement and our crazy concerns and that we live with every day. So any questions for Kathleen? Anyone?
Yeah, one quick question. I'm just curious if you were because you would want 2 people from each municipality. Would you be looking for, like, what kind of positions would you be looking for? Just 2 people who are passionate about this, or from what level of the organization are you looking for participants?
So I'm gonna thank you, Evan. The short answer is, well, actually, if Kimberly or Katie can also chime in, here's the ideal situation. It's, again, to Mayor Craig's point, if you're not in a staff-rich environment, this is a potential opportunity for, let's say, you as a village administrator to reach across the district lines and to reach out to someone in your school district, right? Or to reach out to your library XYZ, right? Like somebody, a decision maker, right? And to start building that relationship. But I also want to defer to MMC. ILCMA and MMC have been thinking about this a lot more than I have. So you guys go.
Well, so to answer Evan's point, I think what initially our conversation was around, we don't want this to be someone who is an intern or someone who's a junior staff person who have really no real ability to, have the authority to execute policies without some other level of permission. And so we are looking for senior leadership, either in a certain department or within the administration, because this is, like, as Kathleen mentioned, it is about performance management, it's about organizational change. And that, as you all know, starts at the top. And so if you as an organization are committed to this, you as an organizational leader should understand the work that has to partake to actually execute this. And it's a time commitment, but it's just like going back to school. I wish we could have see use for this, because I really do think this is a educational opportunity, and it's something that is going to take years. It's not going to be like this program and now I know how to do this work, but it is a foundation that I think as senior leaders we should at least acknowledge we need to be a part of. So I think that buy-in needs to be at the top of a department or an organization, and if the manager is not really the right person to do that, maybe it's someone within a department that really wants to take hold of this and do that within their department. So that would be my observation. And this is just from years of my own practice. It's great to have the involvement of our junior leaders, our junior leaders within the organization. But if we really want to change things, the senior leadership has to be the ones that buy into that.
And I will add, we kind of modeled this requirement based on a different pilot program that the caucus is in year 2 of now, called Aging in a Changing Region, which is focusing on helping municipalities better prepare for their aging populations. In that program, we realized that when communities had participation from decision makers in different departments, they found better outcomes. What we've learned through the working group is this is really a whole of government kind of thing. It touches every department. So having buy-in from multiple higher levels, we really believe is going to make the best impact. And so ideally it would be from different departments, but we understand every community is different. So as long as you can make a case for who you would want to participate, we are open to that.
Very good. What does the Art Ready REDI model? What is that?
Oh, sure. Thank you, Mayor Craig. I was actually going to link it to you guys. So the Ready model, I know everyone, there's JEDI, there's Ready with an A, there's all that stuff. I don't care what you call it. Okay, so it's fine. Like it's DEI. It's actually a 4 specific organizations that have both the resources and the staff, like just larger numbers of staff, to engage in, I was just writing it, mid-management, right? So once top leadership is like, oh, okay, good, we want this, it still takes a lot to actually get mid-level managers on board, sharing the same vocabulary, really understanding, what the organizational vision is that top leadership wants, and then operationalizing it. So it's actually a 3-year model. Kimberly was part of it when she was in the city of Evanston. The Forest Preserves has completed actually their 3rd year, and we're in a 4th year of strategic planning for their next 3 years. So it is really meant for larger organizations that really need to deal with a whole bunch of stuff, but that is what the Ready model is.
Okay, thank you.
I'll send a link too.
Oh, very good. That's good. All right. Without any additional questions.
There's a question.
Mira?
Yeah, I have a question.
You have a question?
Yeah, sorry. My question was a little bit about the actual application process to participate in the pilot.
Katie?
Actually, I know Kathleen has been working on the application, so Kathleen.
Yes, no, thanks for asking that. So, okay, we have a draft of the application, pretty much ready to release by early next week. We're just kind of kicking the tires on some of the ways the questions are worded so that it doesn't confuse everyone. So we will, through MMC and ILCMA, you should get an email with a link and, be able to apply. And ideally, we will have the first cohort identified by probably middle of June, because we're going to have some pre-work before the August meeting. Just, nothing huge, but some videos, some things to like reflections and stuff like that, some stuff. So middle to late June is when we're hoping to announce the first cohort.
Good. Well, it sounds like a plan, and you're on the cusp of sharing that information. So good. I think we're moving along nicely. Any other questions before I move on? Thank you, Kathleen. You got me thinking, you know. That's dangerous. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Group discussion. So we're kind of at the main part of our work with the Mayor's Caucus, working closely with ILCMA and UIC to envision the continuation or kickoff of our pilot. Any comments from anyone? We'd like to, maybe Katie, you'd like to try to facilitate through this conversation. You've been up to your elbows and working this project. Thank you.
Sure. I have some questions that can kind of guide the discussion. It's really, we're going to launch out of the questions we were just asking Kathleen and ask you some more specific questions to make sure that we're headed in the right direction with this pilot. Are you seeing the questions on the screen? Awesome. Okay, so let's start with the first one. Does this proposed pilot match the needs that you've observed in your communities? Is there anything else that should be considered with regards to the structure?
Hi, Katie. I think it does match and meet the needs. It's I got to say I'm pretty impressed with it and excited about it, having been partaking in a lot of the focus groups. So thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Yeah, same here. I was writing down topics that I was hoping to see, and I was able to check off everything. The one thing that's not there, and maybe, oh, so that's the next question, sorry.
Oh. Any other comments on whether this meets the needs you're seeing, or if there's anything else that should be considered?
So I'd like to see something, or I was, and maybe because it's not a system issue, but what work folks will be doing around learning and development, in bringing our leaders up to speed, creating a curriculum that helps us submit the concepts in the organization. So when they go back to their regular daily leadership roles, how are they, are they using their EDI lens to evaluate projects that help our residents?
So to kind of repeat what you said, because I'll make a note of it so that we can consider this for the pilot. Basically, what mechanisms are we putting in place to allow leaders to not only continue to apply this lens in other projects in their work afterwards, but also teach other leaders in the organization how to do this? Is that?
Yeah, so the pilot's great because we'll learn that knowledge, right? But then there's this whole group of people that you support who also support a whole group of people and interact with our residents. So then what's the, how do we put together programs and initiatives that help them understand that EDI is not something separate, it is part of being a leader.
That's a really helpful comment. I don't know if Kathleen, you have any anything to follow up on that. Otherwise, we could just kind of.
Yeah, no, I mean, Michelle, I have a lot. Let me just say, this pilot that's targeting sort of top leadership to sort of, there's an organizational thing. It's like when you are a leader, you have to think about the whole organization versus middle management, where you're like focused on like one department or like one project. That's one piece to this, is existing practitioners. We also are really starting to challenge ourselves in our department around our MPA program students right? That pipeline, like the people who are graduating with their MPAs or MPPs, you want to be able to hire people who already know this stuff, so you don't have to train, right? And that would be really nice. So we're working on that as well. So it's both and like Mayor Craig said, I mean, I don't want this to take more than 10 years, but I'm hoping that we can make an impact sooner rather than later. I mean, the scaling part is hard, but we're trying to push as fast as we can because this is a big problem. So yeah, both and.
I was wondering if you could, in the pilot, address opportunities or ways to sustain a program or programming or in the space DEI in your particular internal community when in villages or spaces where there's so much transition of key roles and key characters that come in and out of these roles, how you build not only a process, but how do you manage a platform where you sustain it once you've got it started, because those things can change so quickly within the span of a 4-year time period, or however you change your staff, that there's got to be some level of sustaining.
Yeah. So, well, two things. One is, I just want to respond real quickly. I think a couple of people are trying to click on the PDF I posted. Can someone just let me know if I messed up and I either uploaded something random or you can't get to it? And then Jude, to your question about sustainability. So I know that we don't have the luxury of picking what the organizational challenges are all the time. They're kind of either presented or foisted on us, but I would honestly say that, from the public administration perspective, one of the roles that city managers or administrators have is to protect the internal environment, right? To stabilize it from all the stuff. And right now, it's really challenging. And retention is a problem across the board. If we don't fix that, then there's no program I can think of that can stabilize, right? That's the role of why we do it this way, right? So that we can attract and maintain really motivated, highly talented, technically excellent staff so that, we're not churning over every 4 years. But I mean, between COVID and even just what Mayor Craig said prior, like the way the state has really starved local municipalities of the support that is needed, we're kind of working with what we got. But I agree. I mean, you can't. I don't know if there's a magic bullet. I don't think so.
My question for the pilot is, how do you mean to address the DEI or JEDI aptitude of those coming in, right? Because people may be coming in with different levels of understanding of DEI. So really pushing their competency and then creating a space for them to understand about continually educating themselves on that and how to continue to push them further then, because this space is constantly changing, right? It's, it may be racial equity right now, that's a huge focus, but tomorrow may, turn around and be something else, right?
Mm-hmm. No, that's absolutely right, Erica. So, I mean, two things. One is just to be really clear, there's two general levels that people talk about racial equity or equity and diversity. One is on the individual level, and one is on the systemic level. This pilot and the READY model and all the work that I do is very explicitly focused on the institutional level. It presumes that people have gone through implicit bias trainings, that they have, kind of done some of that internal work already, and that the real focus is landing on the same page around a shared vocabulary around institutional issues that are driven by inequity or exclusion or marginalization, and then how we shift and think about how you build those structures of inclusion. on an institutional level. That doesn't necessarily mean that we don't occasionally encounter folks who are just not even remotely exposed to some of the language, but it's actually not that important. And that goes to your second point about, hey, the flavor of the day today is equity. Tomorrow could be something else. Given the writing on the wall of what we're seeing in a lot of other states besides Illinois, I assume that the flavor is going to change. The thing about this pilot and the READY model is that it is focused primarily on performance management and organizational change, driven by a racial equity lens. So you can drop that second half. People get salty or cranky or question. We should still be focused on government performance and how we retain and attract really great people to work in our local municipalities and local agencies. Like that's, no one should disagree with that. We're just making the argument that if you address issues of diversity and inclusion, however that looks in your community, okay? I mean, there's communities that have different forms of diversity, that you will actually be more successful in achieving higher levels of performance. I hope that helps.
Oh,
You know, I just want to say, I think that's a great point. I think one of the things that we've talked about with some of our consultants is that there is no single definition of diversity. It varies from community to community. And I know we've spent a lot of time on the ILCMA committee and also here talking about race. And obviously that's one type of diversity, but there are also a variety of other types. And I think as we move forward, we need to focus on this more comprehensive definition so that this is more applicable to more people and more communities.
Agree.
Katie, anything additional, follow-up questioning?
We have two more follow-up questions, which we've already kind of been touching on. What specific municipal practices would you like to see addressed through this pilot that may not have already been listed? Or even which ones that were listed are you most interested in?
I think from Schaumburg's perspective, the one thing that we have seen the most bang for the buck in is in interviewing practices, in terms of selecting employees for municipal roles. There's a number of situations where, just offering, different comments or different suggestions as to how interviews are conducted, or trying to look at the strengths of candidates in a different way or through a different lens has yielded benefits for us. And so I think this idea of recruitment and selection is something that could really help, especially as it pertains to workforce diversity.
Well, that was a great comment, Brian, because I think the interview process and the notion, I keep calling it, of a lens, the lens we look through and model is a significant component for the evolution. Not that it's going to take 10 years, but the evolution of within our municipalities. And so how we track that and how we do that, I think you're right on. I think that was a great comment. Anyone else?
Well, and I mean, just to add one more piece to what Mayor Craig and Brian were talking about, guys. I mean, there's the setting up of new panels, hiring panels, make them diverse. For those of you who have the pleasure of existing within the county of Cook, the hiring platform itself is terrible. It is. So it's that intersection between, yeah, we have this really great idea, but institutionally, there have been barriers. There's a reason why things look the way they do. And so coming together and actually saying, here is the analysis of what has existed and how are we going to start rethinking and addressing the legal issues, the compliance issues, so that we don't get stopped. Because that's what's happened in the past. People have had these great ideas in the past. Like, I don't think we're coming up with, like, you know, Elon Musk level, whatever, to Mars. Like, people know this, but they've been stopped, right? There are barriers. And so coming together collectively and thinking about all of these pieces as teams, you know, as a cohort, as a group, really makes a huge difference.
Well, with that, if you, I think we're kind of winding down here. Katie, how are we doing on collecting some thoughts from our group?
I mean, I think this has been productive, and I would definitely encourage anyone, if other thoughts come up, please feel free to reach out to us. I will send out an email to everyone after this meeting.
So yeah, we're all kind of looking for that great direction, our hope for the future, the success that we have all working together, that we most of us in government respect one another and try to serve our communities at the best way possible. I think Flossmar took initially concept and on it. Those type of modules are excellent. One around the hiring process, boy, you know, that's your future. And as people move through and the old timers move out, you know, it's an evolution, and we have to be representative of that and respect that. So anyone else, final thought before we thank Kathleen and everyone else that's been diving into this? And Katie, what a marvelous job you've been doing tracking all this for us.
Thank you.
Kyle, anything, final thoughts?
I just also wanted to, on behalf of the staff at the Mayor's Caucus, you know, for representing you, Mayor, you know, also thank ILCMA, because it has it's been a three-way partnership, and we don't, the staff over here don't want to hog all the credit for what has, I think, the partnership to get to this point.
Well, I'm trying to dump all the credit onto you and Katie. Job facilitating this whole thing. But Bill McLeod asked me, you want to take the lead on this one? And I said, of course, Bill, I'm happy to do that. And Bill, I think you got the next one. But,
I'll handle the next one. As always, these are very productive discussions, and look forward to the meeting in August.
I don't want to thank everyone. And by August, we'll even have more knowledge around the pilot program, which I'm looking forward to.
Should be good.
Very good. Any final thoughts, anyone? Okay, Katie, pull the plug. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
All right. Have a great day.